Alright, so we're going to start our first nuke assignment. And what I'm going to do is I've opened up nuke, and I'm just going to open up my previous comp so we can see it. And when you open up a comp in nuke, sometimes it'll actually open up a new tab with nuke on the bottom. Sometimes it won't. I was expecting it to do it this time, but it did not. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a simple image like this. There's a street that I found, and we're going to be making it into this blackness. Just kidding. Okay. So there's what we're going to be doing to add to it. Let me just pop this there. There we go. Alright, so here is the image. And actually, let me put this onto that one. Alright, so you can see the differences that we have here. We have this dude in the scene, and then we have these people back here in the scene as well. Okay? Now, does it look 100% photorealistic? Yeah. No, I'm just kidding, it doesn't. It does not look 100% photorealistic, but it does look pretty neat, okay? Especially for the time involved in creating these pieces. So I'm providing all the assets. You're going to be given this folder. This is the NukeComp 01 folder. And you're going to have an images folder, and you're going to have the stuff that you're going to need for this assignment, okay? I just want to show you what we're going to be doing for this in order to get that done, all right? Now, this is what the end result ish is going to look like. Let me just scoot these things over here. We don't really need to see those. So that's what these the end result is going to look like once we're done. Okay. So let's go to a new document. This is where I'll probably make a new thing. Yep, there it goes. See, so now it has both of these open, so I can always reference back to that other one. All right. So the first thing we want to do is bring in those pieces of footage. So we're going to go to the images, and the easiest way to do that is just to grab the images and just to drag them down. There we go. So now they're inside of Nuke. Now, some of our hotkeys we're going to be needing in here is Alt, and I'm going to use the right mouse button to move around my node graph. That's where most of the action is going to happen, is this node graph. Okay, that's how we connect things. Alt middle mouse button will be our zooming in and out of the node graph, and our Alt right mouse button or left mouse button will be also tracking. So left and right are doing the same exact function. So however you want to, whichever one you want to use. Okay. So this is our viewer, and in order for us to see any of these pieces of footage, I'm just going to move this just by left mouse button dragging. However you want to move this, that would be where or however you want to see this, we have to connect this viewer. You see this little arrow. I zoom in on it. This little arrow right here would need to be connected to that. So I can just click this arrow and drag it to this one, and I can see that piece of footage. I drag this arrow to this one, I can see that piece of footage. I can drag my arrow to this one, I drag my arrow to this one, I drag my arrow to that one, and so on. Wonderful. Okay. Each one of these guys is called a node, and the node allows us to connect things together. That's the big purpose of this. Okay. In After Effects, if you use that, which I'm sure you have, or if you've used something like Final Cut, you have layers, and you have a timeline. You have layers, and you just stack them on top of each other, and then that's how things work. Well, in Nuke, we have predefined stuff. So this thing right here, you connect it, this thing right here is a still. It's just a single JPEG. It's a still image, and here is, you know, a timeline. There's no movement to this. It just does that. That's all it does. Okay. If this was a video, then it would play and it would be locked into whatever frames we brought in for this, or however long that movie was. So if we have frames 6,000 to 7,000, then this piece would only run from 6,000 to 7,000. But I could adjust that, you know, using some of these other tools on the left-hand side here. Okay, so same thing with this, same thing with that, all of these. They're all just still images. Okay, so staying with this one, you'll see that the top of this says read 1, okay? And that's if you didn't drag your stuff in, because if you had a sequence, you really couldn't drag a sequence in. You would just click in here and you hit R, and then that would say, do you want to bring in something? And then you could go back and you could find your sequence. So I'm just going to go to here. And I'm just going to show a sequence that I can bring in. And okay, right now it's listing every single frame. If I click on sequences, now I can bring in that entire sequence and open that up. And then I'll have this sequence that I've brought in. Okay? And if I click and drag here, you can see how I can play this little piece of animation. Alright, drag that back there, and I'll just delete that for now. Alright, so on this node, you'll also notice a couple other things. There's a little preview, little thumbnail, and there's also this red, green, and blue here. And that means something. That red, green, blue means that there's a red channel, a green channel, and a blue channel. Now, if I come down here and I hit R again, remember this is the read, okay? But if I move my mouse into this window and I hit R, now I'm seeing the red channel. If I hit G, I'm seeing the green channel. If I hit B, I'm seeing the blue channel. All I have to do is re-hit B, and it'll go back to color, okay? So RGB, and go back to B. And this is where it's changing that right here, RGB. You'll also see there's an A for alpha, a Y for luminance, and an M for matte overlay, all right? We'll get into more of those as we go. Now this read is also up here. If I go to this far left one, this is where read is at, okay? So this is where we can bring in just a read node to bring in a piece of footage, a write node to send footage out, a constant, which is just like a solid in After Effects, a checkerboard, color bars, color wheel, and so on. Okay, so that's where we could bring that stuff in. Now this guy, he has a red, green, blue, and white. All right, so if I go here and I move this arrow over to this one, and I come up here and I hit A, you'll see that it's solid white, meaning that there's an alpha channel, but it's just solid white. Let me bring it back to this one, and you'll see it's black. There is no alpha channel in this one. There is no white channel. Okay. Now the reason I'm showing that is because further down the chain here, you'll see that this guy has a little green one, okay? And that means that he has other stuff going on. Now, what I don't want to do is have to keep going back to this and grab this arrow and shuffle it over here. So I can use another hotkey, which is my numbers. So my numbers in along my keyboard allow me to do that. If you look at the bottom of this, it says 1, okay? So if I click on this guy and I hit 1, you'll see how it automatically connects that arrow to this guy, okay? And because I'm still looking at the alpha channel, I'm seeing his alpha channel. So I'm going to hit A again and get it back to RGB. All right. So if I go here to the RGB, this far left one, I can see those other channels. So if I say none, I'm not going to see anything. If I go to RGB, I'm not going to see the alpha, but you really don't see the alpha anyway. If I go to alpha, I'll see the alpha. It's in red. If I go to AO, this is an ambient occlusion. If I go to Cam Z, this is a depth pass. Now it looks like it's solid red, but as I hover my mouse over this, I want you to pay attention to this area here. You're not seeing anything right now, but as I move my mouse into the red, you'll see that those numbers are changing. Okay, so the red value in these areas is actually 1200. And if I go right here, where about that little guy is, it's about 14 or 15. Okay. This is one of the great things about Nuke is that we're dealing with a lot of information, a whole lot of information. In a typical, let me switch this to my couple over here. In a typical RGB image, we're dealing with values from 0 to 1. And you've seen that in Photoshop, or 0 to 255. You've seen that also in Photoshop. But in here, we're dealing with a lot more refined numbers. You can see that for these red values, this is 50888, 49693, 450289. So I'm dealing with a whole lot of color information inside here. It's really a lot of stuff going on. And it's important when we have that because when we get into stuff like this, where we're looking at the depth, this is actually storing the depth from the camera that each of these objects was at. So that's important because that's going to help us make sure that this is more realistic looking. Okay. If I only had two values, it'd be like close and far. Well, what about the in-betweens? That's what it's giving us. I'm going to go to this custom coloring. You'll see that this is just 0 here and 1 there. And I'm looking down there at those values to see where those values are. And there's some in-betweens as well. There's also a matte. There's also a reflection. There's also a shadow. There's a shadow. And then we go back to RGB. Okay, so that's what that green guy means, is that we have extra stuff happening in there. Okay, now inside of these things over here, there's our read, write, and whatever else. We also have rotoing, dithering, dust, bust, and so on. We're going to be touching on many of these, not every one, but many of these tools as we go. And some of these are just going to be, you know, assignment based. Like for this one, we're never going to go into the keying stuff because the keying doesn't apply to this specific assignment. Here's some other stuff with merging and layers and whatever else. Here's some transforming stuff. So sometimes you'll see me go over here to get a tool, and sometimes I'm going to use the hotkey. And it's good to start a hotkey list so that you have a list of hotkeys going as you're moving along. All right. So like for grade, I would hit G. Okay. There's my grade node, and here's all the information for my grade node over my properties list. Okay. And this allows me to adjust coloring on it. Now you'll see just by grabbing this grade node, if I start playing with these sliders, that nothing's happening to this picture. Okay. And you would typically expect something to happen usually when you earn After Effects and Photoshop and you add something and start moving sliders, that something would happen. But you'll see that this guy is just kind of hanging out. Okay, he's not actually connected to anything. If I click this arrow and drag it in here, it's now connected to this piece of footage. But I'm looking at, that's what the viewer is connected to, I'm looking at this piece of footage. I'm not looking at the result of that grade. So if I grab the arrow and drag it to the grade, now I can see what it looks like with that grade. And I really messed up the settings so it looks like there's nothing there, but there actually is something there. I just have to bring these settings back in. There we go. Okay. So now as I adjust this, that picture is updating. All right. And this is an incredibly powerful tool. Really, really much more robust than some of the other tools that you may be accompanied to. It is going to take some time to get used to doing this. One of the benefits of it is these eyedroppers. Every single one of these things has an eyedropper. That's what this little square is. Also, we can adjust it to just one range. So if I just want to adjust the reds, you can see how I can adjust the reds in that area. Okay, by taking some of the reds away, I'm making it a bit cooler. Turn it off, turn the green on, now I have more purple. Turn it off, turn the blue on, now I have more yellow. Okay, so that's what that's going to do. So I'm just going to delete that, and you'll see the arrow automatically jumps back to there. Now sometimes, like I said, I'll use the hotkey G, and there it is. And sometimes I'll hit Tab, and in Tab I can just type it in. There's grade. And it'll drop a grade node in. Okay. Now it's also important that as whatever I have clicked on, that's where that node's actually going to go. Because I've always clicked off and then added the grade node, it hasn't connected it to anything. But if I click on the street and hit G, you'll see that that grade node pops it right into the chain. Okay, so that's very important because sometimes we'll have several things clicked, and we'll add a grade node and it'll pop it over to the other one, and we wanted something else to happen. All right. So if I click on this and I want to connect it, I can just drag the arrow to that and then hit 1 so I can preview it. Now I could also, if I don't want this connected but I still want to keep it, I can hit Shift X. Oops, not Shift X. They've changed it, or my memory is going. Let me check my list. Hold on. I've missed. It's Control D. There we go. And it disconnects it from that list. Okay. which I could just easily do just by, dragging the arrow off of it and then clicking that to there. That's not a big deal either. Okay. I could also drag this node over a line. You can see the arrow's connected, and it'll drop it in between those two lines. Okay. So Control D, disconnect, and preview it there. Drag it right on top, pops it back in. Okay. I can also hit D if I just want to disable that node. So let's go double click the grade and adjust the settings. Crazy. There we go. And then I can just click on this and hit D back and forth, and I can see what that looks like with and without that effect. And that's something that you'll commonly do inside of Nuke. Okay, so that's the grade node, and that's what we can do with it. A lot of these tools are up here too under Edit. You'll see here is remove input, which is disconnect the input. Here is extract, so that's just pulling it out of there too. There you go. So it extracts it, pop it back in, Control-Shift-X, extracts it. Okay, so it's another way to disconnect that node from the list. Yeah, we'll worry about those things later. Okay, so that's what that is. Now, getting these things to work together is typically done with merges. Okay, merges, copies, shuffles, those are the kinds of things. Here's a shuffle right there. We'll get into what that is. Here's your color correction stuff. Here is blurs and stuff dealing with the channels. Here are our merges down here. And copy. Let's do this one. Copies in one of these. This is one of those things where I just so used to just going to copy. Just grab it from there. Okay, and most of the time you won't even use this because you'll know that I want you to get the copy node. So you'll hit Tab and just type copy. And you'll grab that top copy node. Okay, it's probably in here. Yeah, there it is. Copy. All right, so let's start off with this thing. So this one here, you're not actually going to be using this specific background one. This is in case you wanted to go into 3D with this. I've exported that thing out. So you can ignore this BG one. So I'm just going to set that aside. Okay. So the first thing we want to do when we start working on this is we want to tell Nuke what kind of project we're working on. All right. So I'm going to click down here in this blank area and hit S, and that will bring up my settings. If I go over here and hit S, that'll bring up my viewer settings, and I don't want the viewer settings. I wanted the settings for my project. So I go down here and hit S. So I want to give this a project directory and name. So what I'm going to do is I've set up a folder on the D drive. Okay, Sarcona 2015, 2560. I have a work and a source folder. I have my NukeComp 01 inside of that. Okay, so I'm going to go into my project directory and I'm going to tell it that that's what I'm working on. D drive 2560 work NukeComp 01. Okay, and I'm going to hit open. And then I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this Sarcona NukeComp 001. Okay, this just gives it a name of the project, and this tells it where all those files are. Okay, if you don't do this step when you go to another computer, you have to relink all of these files because now they're in a different spot. You can see how it's going to C user Sarcona whatever. If you go onto a Mac, well, a Mac doesn't have a C drive. If you go onto your home computer, you may not have a D drive. You may not have this user, whatever. So you do that. And so every time you come in, you would just go to the project and set the project, and then Nuke would know where you want to go. Okay, so that's part one, just setting this stuff up here. Okay, you'll have to do that every time you come into Nuke, is just make sure that this stuff is set, especially if you're working on a different computer. Right? So then I'm going to go down here to my full-size format, and I'm going to choose New, and I'm going to say half HD, and I'm going to label it 960 by 540. Now it was already showing in this one because I already have that preset, but that's what you want to do. Okay, so now I have this half HD one. And this is the final comp setting that I'm working at, the final comp size. So right now this document, if I zoom out a touch, is 1600 by 1200. Okay. Well, I want this formatted to 960 by 540, so I'm telling it that my full size format is going to be this. So then as I start reformatting stuff in here, it automatically knows that's my size. And then as I start creating stuff, create a checkerboard real quick. My checkerboard automatically comes in at that correct size. It doesn't come in, sometimes it'll come in at, square. Let me preview this. Like that, and we don't want it square. I want it to be my root format, 960 by 540. Okay? So typically whatever your footage is that you're going to be basing this off of, whatever movie you're going to, that's where this footage size would come in. So if you're dealing with something that's HD, 1280 by 720, then you would find 1280 by 720 or 1920 by 1080 or 4K or whatever. We're dealing with 960 by 540 just because it's a bit quicker. Some of our footage right now would be, or for the class will be 1280. Some of it will be 960. I'm going to avoid going to 1920 just because of time constraints. The bigger these are, the longer the processes take. Okay, so I want to close these guys. I'm done with these, so I'm just going to hit this X up here, and that will close all the open bins that are right there. Okay, so let's start off with this very, very simple. We're going to keep ourselves organized. Stuff that I have not used yet, I'm just going to keep off to the side. Okay. And I try to keep a nice organized graph. Look at this graph and how nice and neat it is. Okay. It's very easy to get this thing messy. It also helps too, if you're on a dual screen, you can grab this node graph tab and just drag it off to the other screen and you have much more real estate. I don't have that ability because I'm recording a lecture, but you do, so take advantage of it. Alright, so we have this, and I want to take this couple, so I'm going to hit 1 on the couple, and I want to bring them into that image. Okay. Now, we already talked about this being the wrong size, so let's first reformat this before we get any further. Okay. Because if I take the couple and I put it in here and then I reformat, well, then the couple is going to be shrunk down, and that would look weird. Or they'll be cropped, in a weird spot. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to reformat it. So I'm going to go over here, and this is where I can find reformat right there. Or I can hit tab and type in reformat, and that's my preferred method. Okay, and you'll see that it automatically sizes it to 960 by 540 because that's my root size format. My resize type, and you'll see there's a lot of different options here. I could say none, and it'll just center it however it centers it. I could say width, and what that means is that it's going to fit the width in here, and the height is going to be cut off. Or I can say height, and you'll see that it fits the height in here, and because the width was actually shorter than the height, then you'll see that we get this stretching. Okay, we're just stretching those pixels just to fill in that gap. Okay, I could say black outside and it'll get rid of that, but I don't want to do that anyway. I can say fit, and I can say fill, and these are essentially the same thing as width and height. I don't know why they have 2 here and 2 here. It's just probably a carryover from something. They also have distort, and we don't want to use distort because you'll see distort is actually going to distort this and squash it in both directions to fit. So I actually want to go with the width and fill it here. Now let's say that I wanted to adjust my framing. I don't really like where it framed that. So what I can do is I need to add a transform in here. I need to move this down. Okay. So if I go to, I'll just click off of this so you can see it. And transform is under here. Transform, I can also just hit T. And if I drag this transform down below reformat, and I move this around, you can see that it gets it adjusted to line up with the frame. Okay. Now I could also, I'm just going to Control X that, and I'm going to Control V, paste it right there. And you can see that this method works too, but with this one we're actually losing the side of this. Okay. Or if I drug this down here, I'm also losing the side of it. All right. So in this case, it's not going to matter where we have this transform. I just deleted it and re-added it in. There we go. I think I want a little bit more sky in this, like that. Okay. Now just, again, to preview, I can just hit the transform and hit D. Something funky is happening right over here. No, I think it's just how it's lining up. It looks odd. Okay. All right, so there's that. Now you'll see that as I adjusted it, I went -76 in the Y direction. This is the X, this is the Y. The X has 0, so if somehow you had an X translation in there, just reset the X to 0. There's also rotation on here. There is scale. There is skewing, and so on. You can play with all these as you go. Some of these, like motion blur, is not going to work unless you actually have this thing moving, which we don't. Okay, so that's that. So I'm going to close these guys. And what I was saying about the order here is that sometimes it'll matter where you have these, like transform being before reformat or transforming after. So if it's not working before, sometimes making it after would, work, just because of how Nuke is calculating this stuff. Okay, as long as you have in the right order that I have it, you should be fine. All right, so I want to take this couple and I want to put them into this piece of footage. So I'm going to go over here to where we have the layers, and I'm going to add a merge. Okay, so I have the couple selected. I'm adding a merge, and this one has 2 inputs. Let me disconnect this for a second. It has an A and a B, and the A is typically what's going to be on top, and a B is what's going to be in the bottom or the background. Okay, so they're going to be on top of this piece of footage, so I'm going to hit them on the A. The footage here is going to be the B, so I'm going to go to the reformat. And again, I don't see it because my viewer isn't connected. So I'm going to click on the merge and hit 1, and then I can see it. Now we're going to see something really strange here, is we're going to see, let me go to the piece of footage, this image is just on top of that image. And we're getting the streaking like we were when we did the reformat and we did the height vertical fit, is that it fits the image and it stretches out those end pixels to compensate that. And so what I need to do is I need to have some way to put these in here. So if we were in Photoshop, what we would do is we would erase this background part of this, and then we would just drop that on top of it as a layer. Okay, so that's what we would do inside of Nuke as well. So what I have is I have this other image. Okay, and this is just a cutout. This is a black and white image. I did go into Photoshop and I just painted white where I wanted the people to be, and I painted black where I wanted the background to be. Okay, and I actually used a layer mask so I could preview it in Photoshop, and then I saved that out as this black and white image. So that's what this other arrow is. You'll see that the merge has a couple arrows. It has this guy here, which is an A2, so if I'm connecting something else to this, I can connect that to it. And on the right side, it has this mask. And that's what I want to use this for, as a mask. So I'm going to say, use this as a mask, preview this, and I get an error, non-existent channel used for mask. Okay, so I'm going to come over here, and it's going to say mask RGBA alpha. Okay, so it's basically trying to use the alpha channel from this guy. This guy, if we look at the icons on the bottom, doesn't have an alpha channel. It just has red, green, and blue. Because we're dealing with black and white, I can just use the red channel as my alpha. Okay, so I'm going to say, well, don't use the alpha, use the red channel. And now you'll see that these people are right here. Now they do look a little ghostly. Okay, if I go here, you'll see that, this is perfectly cut out. It's, a value, if I look down here, it's a value of 1. And there's that. And then that goes in here, and they turn out to be, a little bit transparent. Okay? This is not typically the way we want to do this. It's an acceptable way for some circumstances, but not for the way that we should be doing this. Okay? And I'll show you another reason why. We don't want the couple here. Obviously, they look very, very tiny standing right here. So we come to this couple and we add a transform, which is T, or over here, transform. And I take this, and you'll see that the second I add a transform, that it says, okay, I realized that there was no alpha channel on there, so we're just going to accept it, and now we can move this around. And as I move this, you'll see that the couple moves, but their mask does not move. Okay, so then I could say, okay, well, I'll just take this mask and copy it with Control-C and go to this one and paste it, and now that works. But now I have to move two things around. Okay, so it's kind of a hassle to have to do that. So I'm going to delete this transform. I'm going to disconnect the mask. And what I'm going to do is another method here. Okay, I'm going to pull this guy up, and I'm going to copy this into this. And I want to say, I want to use this guy as an alpha channel for this one. So I'm going to say here, and then under the layers, there's that copy. And I'm just going to drag it right into the middle here. Okay, and again, it's saying missing input channel. It's missing the alpha. There is no alpha. So I'm going to use the red channel, and I'm going to copy that to the alpha. It still says error, but that's just being stupid. There we go. Okay, and then there's my transform, and there's my merge. Okay, so now you'll see that, you know, they are following it. Okay, but now we have this, you know, oops, be careful of that. I want to grab just in the middle and move it around. I don't want to have this background in here. I want to cut it out. So I have to apply that alpha channel. Right now it's reading the alpha, it's just not applying it. So here's where we have to just, you know, make sure we're doing things in the right order. Is I'm going to go after this copy, I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to add a pre-mult. And what that's going to do is just basically take the alpha channel and apply it and make the black stuff transparent and the white stuff opaque. Okay, and the second I add that pre-mult, you'll see that it goes through and does cut that out. Okay, so the process for getting this is I had my couple in color, my black and white couple. I used a copy, and I copied the red channel from the black and white as the alpha channel for this. I pre-multiplied it, I transformed it, and now I can move it wherever I want. Okay, so I'm going to use this as a sizing here. I actually don't want them to be too close because they're, you know, they really don't match. Everyone else here is wearing heavy winter clothes, and they're like in the middle of summer. Their lighting is not matching the rest of the lighting in the scene. All right, so this is just to get us in the scene. This is not to, you know, anything we want to showcase. All right, so I'm going to go here on the edge of this circle, and you'll see that the arrows are like on the angles, top left, bottom right, and so on, like an X. And I'm going to click and drag. Okay, that shrinks it down. I could also just come here to scale and shrink it down as well. And I'm going to go to the middle and just drag this. I'm going to put them way back here. Okay, that's a car. That's them. They're not going to be that big, so still shrink this down a bit. And we can pretty much get away with this because it's so far away. Here's some more people standing next to them. And I'm using that as reference. There we go. Okay, even though they're like super pixelated, that's going to work. Now I can close this and see, oh, now they look too tiny. Okay, so we'll just double click that transform again, maybe make this point 28, 0.26. There you go. That seems to be about right. Okay. So now I have this couple, and it's perfect. They're just like walking along. But it doesn't really look like they're walking along. If you look at, first of all, the coloring of everyone, you can see that they're dark, dark, dark. These guys are bright. They're like super bright, shiny, reflective people walking down the street. So let's fix that. So anywhere inside this chain, I can do this. I can do this all the way back here, and it'll work. Or I can do it even after this, it'll work, because it's just adjusting their coloring. All right. So if I go back here, I like to do it back here on the original footage. I'm going to add a grade node. That's under this grade. Okay. So I'm going to go and just adjust some of their coloring here. Basically, I just want to really darken them up a bit. That way they kind of fit in with the crowd a little bit better. Okay, previewing it, I like to just go to the grade and hit D, and just see, yeah, that's definitely helping getting them sewn into the scene a little bit more. I probably have gone a little bit too far on the gain. There we go. All right, so these are my numbers here. I just pulled the black point up a little bit, pulled the white point up a little bit, lift is down a little bit, the multiply is down a little bit. And it gets them so they're, sewn into the scene a bit better. Obviously there they're glowing, here they're not. They're better seated into the scene, okay? Also, if we look at some of these people, there's a bit of a reflection underneath them, and there's a bit of a shadow underneath them as well, okay? So we should add those features into this couple as well. So we're going to do that. Now what I don't want to do is have to redo this entire process again. This is, again, one of the great things about Nuke, is that once I have something set up, I'm going to hit spacebar, or tap spacebar, and that'll zoom into this area. Let me just scoot doggy over. Let me scoot this over. Okay. Once I have this whole thing set up here, I can really create branches of this and merge that into this chain as well. Okay, so if I wanted, 6 couples, we'll just do that real quick. I'm going to add another transform here. So just hit T, and I'm going to take this right to that pre-multiply. So this pre-mult is going to this transform, and it's going to that transform. And then we merge this in. So I'm going to add another merge node and drop that in here. And I'm going to take this transform and just scoot it over. There we go. So now you can see I have a couple back here and I have a couple here. And they're both using the same adjustments that I've already set up. And this is why you'd want to put the grade way back here and the scoot that down. The grade way back here, because that way it's all in the line. Okay, so if I start transforming things or copying things, I still have this. Still have this that I could utilize over and over and over again. I could add another transform. I could add another merge. And now I have 3 couples. Okay, and this is done, if you watch anything where they have like a stadium full of people, this is kind of how they do that whole setup. Okay, I'm just going to delete these transforms here and that one there. Okay, all right, so now what we need to do is we need to get the reflection, and the reflection is simply just them upside down. Okay, they're so far back we're not going to see any subtle variations, but that's what we want to do. So I'm going to go to my transform, and I'm going to add it actually after this. So I'm going to go from this transform into another transform, and then I'm going to merge that in to this link, and I want to flip this over. Okay, so if I go to my scale, you'll see my scale has only 1 unit. If I click the 2, it'll give me 2 units, and then I can just make my height a -1. Now you'll see that it made a -1 up here. I don't really want that to happen. I want to take my pivot and put my pivot right by their feet. So I hold the control key and I click and drag and I move this right about by their feet. Okay, so that's my pivot now. So when it flips over, it should flip right on the other side. -1 for the height, and there we go. Okay. Now we do need to adjust it because obviously, let me turn that off. Obviously that doesn't look realistic. It just looks like there's a person basically underneath them. Looking at the reflections of some of these other people, it's very, it's like right there. That's the reflection, and this one barely, you can't even see the reflection too much. Okay, so I really want this to be tapered down. So this is where I can use a mask on this one to soften that transition. Okay, so I'm going to come over here off to the no man's land and hit O. That's for roto, and that's also under here, roto. And I'm going to drag this arrow onto the roto. And what the roto does is it creates a mask. Right now there is no mask showing, branch because I just deleted it, because I didn't delete it, but I connected it, and there is no mask inside here. Okay, so this is just like the pen tool in Photoshop. So clicking, dragging, I'm just draw a little area around the couple, like that. Okay, I don't have to hold anything down, I'm just clicking until I get the points set up right. And then you'll see that they have these little branches off of them. These little branches allow us to fade. So that's what I'm doing. I'm clicking on the point and then pulling that little branch to get it to fade. So now you can see we have a nice little fading here. Now this might still be too strong. So if I go to the merge, I can pull down this mix of how much that merge is affecting it. So something like that could work. Okay. Also, it shouldn't be too sharp. All right. So this guy here, this is my reflection, should have a little bit of blurriness to it. So over here, remember we saw we have blur. We also have sharpen. We have soften. So I'm going to go and add soften. And I'm just going to drag it right there. And I can play with the amount. Okay, and I'll disable it and re-enable it. You can see it is a subtle effect, but that's what's really going to make this, is a bunch of subtle effects. Okay, so now we can definitely tell that there's something under there. If we just disabled this merge, it really doesn't show off that there's even a reflection. And now we see that there's some sort of reflection happening over there. Okay, so let's another quick review. We took our initial comp, we transformed it, we reformatted it just to get the framing correct. We took our couple, we did a grade on them to adjust their color. We copied the alpha from here into the original one. We pre-multiplied it to apply the alpha channel. We transformed it and merged it on top of the footage so that we can get them positioned here. Then we did another transform, which is basically just a copy, softened it, and then merged it, and that's the reflection. And then we use this little roto as that. Now another cool thing about Nuke is at any point I can go here and hit 1 and see what that is happening. Go here to the grade and see what's doing there. Go here to the copy and see what it's doing. Go here to the pre-mult and see what it's doing. Go here to the transform and see what it's doing. Now in this case you'll see that the transform is actually sticking it way out here, and that's just a result of it not being merged in yet. Once it's merged, it puts it in the right spot. Okay. Then we transform this. Again, it's way out here. We softened it. We merged it. Now, if I wanted to see what this soften looks like before we did any of that, I could just disable that this transform. There we go. And that transform. And preview the soften. And I can see what that soften is doing to the pixels of this. Okay. And there's our merge on top of it with that little thing there. Again, I can come back to this merge here and adjust the amount of reflection. I don't want to have too much. Subtle. And you'll also notice that because I started adjusting this mix, that I'm starting to get this X over it. Okay, so if I pull this all the way up, the X goes away. Pull it down, you can see it's more subtle. So that's just another indicator that we'll pay attention to as we go for this. Okay, so that's that. So now what I want to do is add a little drop shadow in here as well. So what I need to do is create basically a black solid. Okay, and I don't really like to use a black solid because with the shadow I just want to darken the area underneath their feet. Okay, so what I can do is I can go over here to my color adjustments and I can add a grade. That's not color adjustment. So I'm add a grade. And let's just say I went like that. Okay, really, really dark. I can't see any of that darkness. I just want it around their feet. I don't want it everywhere. So that's where, again, I could use a mask on here because you'll see that the grade has a little mask pull-off knob. So I'm going to hit O for roto and drag the mask to the roto. And I'm just going to go under their feet. Come on. And I'm imagining it on the sidewalk itself, okay? Not just under their feet, but just on the sidewalk. I'm going to pull out, come on. I'm going to pull out these little handles just to help soften that. Okay, I need another one, so I'm going to go over here to this bottom Bezier and draw another one for the girl. Now this is very, very drastic right now, just so I can see it, and then I can adjust what that's going to look like. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to frame it. You'll see it looks like there's two big black blobs by their feet. So if I go to my grade, I can just bring down, oops, bring down that gain less, okay? So you can see the look before and after of what that shadow on there looks like. Okay, now we could also say, well, you know, now it's actually darkening their feet, because it is, it's darkening their feet, and it shouldn't be. So this is where maybe I want to take this grade, and I'm just going to Control X to cut both of those, and I'm going to put it right here. So I'm going to paste, and I'm just going to grab the grade and just slide it in between. Okay, so now what that does is it puts it on the ground between that. Okay, now you could also say, well, the reflection, if I just move this reflection, just so you can see, I moved it up, it's actually going to be reflecting on top of them, not on the bottom of them. It's actually reflecting on the top of them, and it shouldn't be. So I could also say, well, I should take this reflection and move that up as well. Well, because they're not really interacting, it's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. Okay? And because it's so far away, we really only need the effect. We don't really need it to be 100% accurate. Okay, so there's a reflection, there's the couple, and there's the shadow. And it looks like pretty much that they're, you know, for the most part are in the group. If I gave them darker clothes and did some more color adjustments to this, I could really make them seem like they're seated in this picture. Okay. Now, as for my node graph, I make sure this is nice and organized. Okay. These little guys will snap. Okay. I don't want it like this. I want it snapped. And I like to keep, and this is just a common thing in the industry, is people will keep all the A's for the merges coming from one side and the B's being the main line. Okay, so this is basically my main line of my node graph, and this stuff is just stuff that's getting piped into it, just stuff that's adjusting it. And then here's all my masks on that side. Okay, so as I start bringing more stuff in, this center line is going to stay true, and I'm just going to start adding stuff into this mix. If I go back to this one, you can see here's that center line right here, and then here's all the stuff that I'm adding into it. So here is, that's something else. Here's the couple, there's the copy, there's the transform, popping it in there. On this one, I did something different for the shadow, is I did a roto with a constant instead of the grade, and that's, you know, acceptable also. It's just a matter of how you want to do it. And then here's the doggy, and you'll see that he's actually being branched off into several different areas in order for him to connect correctly. Okay, so now might be a good time to kind of walk away, take a little break, you know, go get a beverage of non-alcoholic content, and then start the doggy part. Okay, the doggy's going to be basically the same thing, but we're going to be doing it a little bit differently. Okay, this dog, if you're back, this dog is a CG element. This is something I downloaded a free model, I put him into Maya, and I rendered him out so that he would have his skin here, he would have a reflection, and he would also have a shadow. We can't really see the shadow because it's black, but it's there. If I take this, I'm going to create a constant just so you can see it. Okay, a constant is simply just a solid. I'm going to make it white, and I'm just going to merge the doggy into this constant, and you'll see that he has a reflection, and you can see his shadow right there as well. Okay, wonderful. So he has all these things, but he has all these other channels that are going to help us make it look more realistic. Okay, so we're going to start this just like we did the other one. Let's just take him and we'll merge him into the chain. So he's the A, so he's going to stay off to the left. Here's the B, we're going to drop it in. And you'll see that it doesn't really look realistic. His reflection is like crazy dark. And I want to be able to adjust that reflection. I don't want to have this reflection just like, here. I want to be able to adjust reflection separately than him. And I could do the same thing that we did with the couple back here, but when you get into some of these reflections, you have to be aware that like the top of his mouth, let's say his tongue wouldn't be reflecting down here. Not that we see it, but you just have to be aware that that kind of stuff wouldn't happen. The top of his back wouldn't be reflecting down here, and that's what would happen if I just flipped it over, okay? So we have to be aware of that. Sometimes you'll see cars, and CG cars, and you'll see the hood is in the reflection, and that doesn't make sense because the hood wouldn't be reflecting, but you can't see the hood in the reflection. So that's what these other channels are for. So these allow us to go through and separate some of these elements. Okay, so here's this custom color, and you see this custom color is basically the mask like I did up here with the couple. Okay, I also have a matte that is everything, and I have his reflection, which is just there, and I have his shadow, which is just there. Okay, so what I want to do is just separate these elements. So before I even merge this guy into this chain, I'm going to separate his elements. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to do what's called a shuffle. Okay, and a shuffle allows me to separate those elements. So this one is going to be called reflection underscore shuffle. That way we know what kind of node it is. And I just come here to my in RGB and I go to reflection. And you'll see that now this is just his reflection. That's all that's there is just the reflection. I'm going to go again and do another shuffle, making sure it's not already connected to anything else, and drag it to this guy. And I'm going to rename this one to be shadow underscore shuffle. And if I preview this, I change this to shadow, there's a shadow. And I'm going to come over here and add another shuffle. And this one, let's see what we're going to do. This is going to be as ambient occlusion, so we'll say AO underscore shuffle. And that should be good, okay? So I'm going to take these guys, and this is where it gets tricky because we got to figure out how to connect all these things into the mix. And I'm going to think about the order that things should happen. So realistically, the reflection should be on the very bottom, and then the shadow should be on top of the reflection, and then the ambient occlusion will be on the very top, and then the color will be in the middle. Okay, so I'm just dropping these kind of in the order that they'll be connected. All right, so first thing, reflection. So let's take this reflection and drop that on here and preview that. Okay, so right now I'm looking at, there's the reflection, there's this, and if you look closely, you can see that reflection. Okay, I'll disable the reflection. You can definitely see where there's now a reflection of him. I may want that a little bit more pronounced. Okay, and that's where I can come into this reflection and add a grade. And typically I'll multiply or gain. You have to be careful with some of these because I start taking the black point up, and you'll see that the whole thing is being adjusted. I want to make sure that I'm not touching any of those values that are helping it become transparent. If I go to this reflection, I hit A for alpha, you'll see there's an alpha there. Okay, but when I start to add grades and stuff to this, then it's going to be adjusting everything. Now I can can do that or adjust that by going to this and saying use the alpha. This is kind of like pre-multiplying it, during that stage. I don't want to get too deeply into that yet. All you have to know is that if you switch this to alpha, then it'll only adjust those individual colors of this guy and not, the full-blown stuff. Okay, so that's good there. All right, I can adjust this after. Your first step is just to kind of get these into place. So we did the shuffle to get the reflection separated. We graded it, setting this and just brightening it up. Then we merged it down. Okay, so now I want to merge the shadow in here. Okay, and you'll see the shadow is white. If I go here and hit 1, yep, it's white. It should be black. So this is one of the things when you render it out, it just becomes white. So I'm going to add in an invert to the shadow node, and you'll see that it turns that into a black and white. I'm going to say just invert the RGB. Not that the alpha is going to do anything. And then we'll merge that on top, and we'll see that, you know, this is not really looking the way we want. I merged it, but it's, you know, solid white. Let me go back here, and I look at this, and there's, you know, my shadow. I look here, and it's not cutting it out. Okay. Well, remember, like before, we had to do a pre-mult. So there we go. So I pre-multiply it. It applies the alpha channel and puts it in here. For the reflection, the alpha channel really wasn't necessary. Okay. If I came here and did a pre-mult, my mouse didn't fall down. You'll see that it actually got rid of that because of the alpha channel just being a bit too strong in what we're seeing. Okay, or not being strong enough actually. Okay, so it worked out pretty good that we were, you know, not using the alpha channel for that one, but for this one we definitely need it so we can see that shadow. Okay, and there's the shadow. All right, now it's most likely going to need to be adjusted. That seems really dark for this specific scene, so obviously we will adjust it as needed. Okay, but for now we're just getting our ducks in a row. All right, so now I want to take this guy and drop him into the mix. So I'm going to merge. And this is where, again, it gets tricky. I want to merge this, and I'm dropping that in here. Now, I don't like the lines to cross. The lines should never, ever cross. Just like Ghostbusters, you never cross your beams. So I'm going to hold down the control key, and you'll see these little diamonds show up. I'm going to grab the diamond for that line and just drag this over. And you'll see that it just creates a little elbow joint. Makes it much easier just to kind of line those things up. Okay. Now again, if I take this and I'm merging it, you'll see that he is, you know, sitting right here, and he has his shadow, or his reflection is now, you know, gone, and I kind of ruined that. So I'm going to say use a mask, and I'm going to use my custom color red. That should be one. I'm just going to go back here, custom color. Right, it's not reading it. And sometimes that'll happen too, where it just doesn't read it. However, it's getting from here into there. It just can't read that information. So that's no big deal either, because what I can do is I can copy it out. So I'm going to just say copy. And I had something selected, so let me delete that. Copy. And I'm going to copy this. It's not actually copy. We'll use a shuffle. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say use the custom color into the alpha channel. There we go. All right, so what I want to use, let me delete this shuffle again to show you that. Drop it back in the chain. So I want to use that custom color. So if I click here and go to custom color, okay, and I'm previewing this, it erases that custom color. So what I want to do is basically I want to keep this information, the RGB here, but I want to use the custom color as an alpha. Now I could use a copy, but it gets messy because I have the A and the B connected to the same thing and blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to say in 1 is RGB, in 2 is custom color, and in custom color I'm going to say use the alpha channel from custom color. So now if I go to A, you'll see that the alpha channel is being used from custom color. Okay, so now if I come back down here, you'll see that he is now cut out. There it is with that, there it is without. Okay, so RGB, and then let's just say shuffle custom color. There we go. All right, so there's that, and then the final one is the ambient occlusion. I'm going to merge that. And again, I don't want to cross, so I'm going to hold Control and drag that dot node over here. Okay. Now, ambient occlusion again is it's a separate, special kind of pass. What I want to do with this one is I don't want to just merge it on top of it, or add this into it. I want to actually change the operation from over to multiply. Just like Photoshop and After Effects, there's a whole list of things that you can do to this. We've typically used over at this point, but multiply is acceptable as well. Okay. So now that we have this in here, I'll show you what the ambient occlusion did. Let me just disable this. You can see it just kind of darkens those dark areas. Okay, the areas that should be dark, just makes them nice and dark. Okay, especially these contact points by the feet. Okay, so now that we have this in here, straighten that guy out, straighten this one out. Yep. We can come back and start adjusting. So I know my shadow is a bit rough. So let's go over to my shadow. And I'm just going to take the mix down a bit. I know my reflection is a bit strong, so I'm just going to double click and just pull that reflection value down as well. And this is another cool thing too. Let's say I wanted to adjust it, move him over to the left. I can click here and hit T, and you'll see that it automatically connected all the branches into that transform, and then I can just scoot him over. There we go. So I can have him off to the side here. I can have him off to the side here. Obviously, it's going to look funny if he's here because he's not really interacting with this grate so much. But I think over to the side would work. Now I am getting, you'll see that he's cutting off the picture. So at some point there's some sort of alpha channel cutting it off. So I would have to go to this. No. No. There it is. It's right on that ambient occlusion that's darkening it. And that's just because this ambient occlusion now has black over here. And it's multiplying those pixels. So that's what's happening. So I can go to the transform and don't turn black outside on. Just leave that off. And now I can really move him anywhere and get him really tweaked to where he should be. I could even scale him down some. I have to be careful though because he doesn't have, let me just go here. He doesn't have anything past this point, so he'd be stretched out. But again, we could always add a roto into that to get him to be nicely shown there. And that's really only the reflection. So if I just came to my reflection node, which is right here, not shadow, reflections at the bottom, I added a roto. I can just draw a little shape around him, which I probably want to do anyway. And just soften these handles some. There we go. And that's going to look much more realistic. Let's see, we have a nice little reflection for him. Okay. Then we're going to do some color adjustments too. So I can go back up here. I can do a grade. And maybe just adjust his overall coloring too. Again, let's make sure we do the multiply by alpha. Now he does look a bit sharp too, you'll notice that. There we go. Let's check out before and after. It's subtle. That's all we need, something subtle. I probably want to take his highlights down a bit. I'm going to take this gamma down some. Okay, so I can also do a soften. I can do a blur too. I'm just going to try soften first. Sometimes you really have to zoom into the pixels to even see what's happening. And it is subtle. And I think I like the way that's looking. And it's basically just doing it more to the edges. So I'm also going to add a defocus in here. And go extreme, you know, that way you can really see what's happening with it. Gone. And what defocus is going to do is actually going to blur it, but it's going to keep those highlighted areas. So let's take defocus, take soften and disable them. And you can see we're really getting something that looks much more sewn into the scene, and that's what we're after. Okay. Now one more thing I want to add to this. If we look at the back of this guy's jacket, you can see that there's a lot of like pixelization noise. I'm going to pull this up a bit so you can see it some more. Okay, a lot of blockiness inside there. Let's go over to our little dragon guy. And you'll see that he really doesn't have that. He's pretty clean overall. Alright, so I want to add that into my dragon guy. Click that so that we can make him look a little bit more realistic as well. So I'm going to move these up. And I use the control key. I hold control and click and drag on a node. It drags everything above it. So if I wanted to move everything up, hold control, I can drag everything up. Hold control here, drag that up. Okay, so I'm going to put it right between these because I don't want to soften the grain after I put it on there. I'm going to go here and I'm going to add grain. And you'll see that now he gets this little grainy pattern on him. Okay, so this is where we have to kind of go through and try to match it up to something. So I'm going to pull down maybe the intensities of each of those. And this is the size. You can see size, irregularity, intensity. Yeah, that's way too big. Typically the blue is a little bit bigger. Let's see if that adds anything. Yeah, it's definitely adding something to the scene. It's making it look a bit more realistic looking. Okay, and I can also go up here and add an edge blur, and sometimes that'll assist too. That'll make things look pretty neat. And what this is going to do is just blur the edges some, kind of blending it in with the background. You can see here it is with the edge blur and these pixels here with the building. Here it is without. It looks like there's a little bit of a line going around it. So yeah, I'm going to leave that edge blur on there too. Alright, so that looks pretty cool. Now it's a little bit different than the original one that I showed. Okay, I did it a little bit different way, but it works the same. Okay, it's just a matter of getting this end result and understanding these nodes here. Okay, we want to make sure we create a nice clean graph while we're doing this. Okay, there's that, there's that. Okay, and it's going to be confusing at first because, hey, this is the first time you've done this. And if it helps, just make it longer. Make it, you know, so you can really see what's happening in each one of these areas. Okay, that way you know, here's where we did some stuff to the ground itself. This should actually be part of the couple. That's what that is. Okay, here's where we did stuff to the actual source footage. This is all getting the couple situated. And this is all getting that dragon implemented into the scene. Okay, and this goes on and on and on. They, you know, adding more elements in here, you could really create a huge node graph of stuff to make this scene really come together. Okay, now I want to do one more thing, which is put a little vignette on this. So I'm going to do a merge. So I've clicked on nothing, and I'm doing a merge. So I'm going to click the A here, hold Control, drag my little knob down. Oops, I'll pull it off to the side here. And then the B is just going to be that same thing. Okay, and I'm going to do a multiply on this. And this was a cool technique that I really like the way it turned out. All right. So now I've done this multiply, and you can see, it looks horrible. Now I'm going to take a, click off and do a roto. So I hit O. And I'm just going to create a little shape around here. I'm only going to use 4 points. I'm going to fan it out to the corners. It'll look better once it's actually done. The point of the vignette is that it just softens the edges, darkens the edges, and it brings our attention more towards the center. And that's what our goal is in this instance. Okay, so right now it's doing the opposite. It's darkening the center and lightening the edges. So I just come over here to my roto, and there's this little box right here, and this will invert it. There we go. Okay. So now if we disable the merge and re-enable it, you can see that's a nice vignette. All right, it really brings your attention to this guy right in the center and not anywhere else. All right, I can also just go to my merge, and I can knock this down too if I decide it's a little bit too much. Sometimes people don't soften it enough, and their vignettes end up really crazy. Now you notice I have a small circle in the center and a big circle on the outside. If this comes in too much, let me go to this one, like that, you can really tell there's a vignette. There's a hard line coming in right here, and you don't want that to happen. You want to just stay nice and soft and very subtle. You want it to look like it's a framing aspect of the camera and not necessarily of that. Now I could also go through and add grades and whatever else to this too. So I'll pull that up. I could add a grade. Just add this grade right in here. Okay. And I could give this a, coloration to help kind of tie the elements together as well. So I'm making it a little bit more blue. It's kind of neat there. I'm taking some of the warmth out of it, so now it's just an overall bluish color. And that could look pretty neat as well. I'll go the other way and just kind of warm it up some. There, I'm just going to leave it like that. Now, if this was a production piece, there's other stuff that we'd want to fix in here too. We'd want to replace the sky. The sky looks way blown out. The values in this are just way too high, and it's just getting destroyed, basically. So that would be something that we could adjust as well. We'd have to cut out this background and drop in a new sky, or we could just add elements on top of it and blend it into the background. And that would work too. Just have to find the right images for that, okay? But for the assignment, we're just going to keep it simple-ish. I mean, this is pretty, it looks complex, but breaking it down into those little elements, it makes it much easier. And these nodes that we're using, the edge blur, defocus, soften, grain, grade, transform, shuffling, inverting, pre-multiplying, merging, copying, we're going to use those over and over and over and over and over again for pretty much every assignment. Okay, not every one, but pretty much every one. Okay, and then still at this point we can go back and say, you know, where's my reflection? There's my reflection. Here's where the merge is. I can still go through and adjust how this is looking. You know, I can pull it up, pull it down. I can come and grade that reflection some more. I can go to my roto. I can pull that down to have a little bit more reflection coming in there or whatever. You know, we have lots of different areas. My advice to you is go through, do this just like I did it, and then come through and just try to tweak some things, or maybe even find another picture online and try to add that picture into the mix of your stuff, like I did with this couple here. Try to add another couple somewhere else in there, or try to add another person, or try to add anything, you know, try to add a car. It's hard to find a car because you have to get the right perspective. So that'll work. All right, so now to get this out of Nuke, what we do is we go and we add a write node. Okay, we did a read to bring them in. We add a write node to take it out. Okay, we're doing a still image, so it's not a huge deal. So I'm going to click on the folder. It's going to say, where do you want to put this? And I'm just going to say, you know, let's go back to my NukeComp folder and into my images. And I'm going to say Sarcona final still comp 01. And then I put the extension. So I'm going to put dot tiff in here and then hit render. And it'll say input 1 to 1 show. And then it'll output it. And if I go into my NukeComp folder, into my images, here is my final image. Okay. Now it does look horrible inside here. Let me open this up inside. Let me just double check. Oh, I think it's just because it's viewing it through this. Let me open it in Fcheck or some other program. Yeah, whatever. Let me open it in Photoshop and we'll see. Or better yet, I can just drag it back into Nuke and preview it, and yep, that's perfect. Okay, so it's just the Windows viewer is just not previewing it correctly. Okay, so once I open this up in an actual program, it'll be nice and neat and clean and wonderful and gorgeous. Okay, Photoshop is open already, so or it's opening. Yep, here it is in Photoshop, and obviously those hard white lines, no, I'm not going to do a survey now. Hard white lines in the bottom were not going to be there. So perfect, wonderful, gorgeous. All right, so that's assignment number 1. Watch it twice, 3 times, 4 times, whatever it takes. These concepts are not going to go away. You know, you got to make sure you understand at least the basics of what we're doing. Maybe not being able to do this entire thing from scratch, but at least understanding why we're doing some of the things we're doing and what some of these basic nodes are doing to, you know, a limited extent. I don't think you're going to be an expert at stuff like the shuffle node. It really took me, you know, a couple of goes at it before I really understood that we're just taking information from here and pulling it out into a different node, into its own little node right there. Okay, so that's it. I'm saving my file. Nuke does save as you go along the way, so it doesn't automatically save, but as I hit Control S every couple minutes, it'll save, and that's what I want. Okay, so there's your